Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayet. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Nara Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Srimantan Svakata Krishna, Punya Shavana Kirtanam, Hridyantasto Hibadrani Vidunoti Suhi Satam. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, of the super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment for the heart of the devotee who relishes his message, which are in themselves virtues when properly heard and chanted. Nastapraye sabhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevayam bhagavati utamashloke bhakti vavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Let me just increase the font here.
Let me resume, Mataji.
Thank you, just a little bit.
Is it good?
Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 14, the story of King Bina. And we're going to cover texts 8, 9, and 10. Text 8. Aho ubhayata praptam lokasya vyasanam mahat daruni ubhayato dipte eva tashkara palayo. Synonyms. Aho, alas, ubhayata, from both directions, praptam, receive, lokasya, of the people in general, vyasanam, danger, mahat, great, daruni, alok, ubhayata, from both sides, dipte, burning, eva, like, tashkara, from thieves and rogues, palayo, and from the king. Translation. When the great sages consulted one another, they saw that the people were in dangerous positions from both directions. When a fire blazes on both ends of a log, the ants in the middle are in a very dangerous situation. Similarly, at that time, the people in general were in a dangerous position due to an irresponsible king on one side and the thieves and rogues on the other. Text 9. Arajakta Bayedesha Krito Raja Tat Arhana Tatoapi Asid Bayam Twadyam Katham Shat Sasti Dehinam. Synonyms. Arajaka, being without a king, Bayat, out of fear, Esha, this Vina, Kritaham, was made, Raja, the king, Atad Arhana, they're not qualified for it. I'm sorry. They're not qualified for it. Tata, from him, Api also. Asit, there was. Bayam, danger. To then. Adya, now. Katam, how. Siad, can there be. Svasti, happiness. Dehinam, of the people in general. Translation and purport. Thinking to save the stage from irregularity, The sages began to consider that it was due to a political crisis that they made Vina king, although he was not qualified. But alas, now the people were being disturbed by the king himself. Under such circumstances, how could the people be happy? Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 18.5, it is stated that even in the renounced order, one should not give up sacrifice, charity, and penance. The brahmacharis must perform sacrifices, the grihastas must give in charity, and those in the renounced order of life, the vanaprasthas and sannyasis, must practice penance and austerities. These are the procedures by which one can be elevated to the spiritual platform. When the sages and saintly persons saw that King Vina had stopped all these functions, they became concerned about the people's progress. Saintly people preach God consciousness or Krishna consciousness because they are anxious to save the general populace from the dangers of animalistic life. There must be a good government to see that the citizens are actually executing the religious rituals, and the thieves and robbers must be cursed. When this is done, the people can advance peacefully in spiritual consciousness and make their lives successful. Text 10. Aheriva paya posha kasyapya anartha brihit vina prakrityaiva kala sunita garva sambhava. Synonyms. Ahe, of a snake. Iva, like paya, with milk. Posa, the maintaining. Poshakshayam, Poshakasyam, of the maintainer. Api, even. Anartha, against the interest. Brit, becomes. Vina, King Vina. Prakritayam, by nature. Eva, certainly. Kalaha, mischievous. Sunita, of Sunita, Vina's mother. Garba, the womb. Sambhava, born of. Translation. The sages began to think within themselves, because he was born from the womb of Sunita, King Vina is by nature very mischievous. Supporting this mischievous king is exactly like maintaining a snake with milk. Now, he has become a source of all difficulties. Purport. Saintly persons are generally aloof from social activities and the materialistic way of life. King Vina was supported by the saintly persons just to protect the citizens from the hands of rogues and thieves, but after his ascendance to the throne, he became a source of trouble to the sages. Saintly people are especially interested in performing sacrifices and austerities for the advancement of spiritual life. But Vina, instead of being obliged because of the saints' mercy, turned out to be their enemy because he prohibited them from executing their ordinary duties. A serpent who is maintained with milk and bananas simply stores poison in his teeth and awaits the day to bite his master. Oh my God, Mirandasya. Mirangela Sakya, Chakshan, Tendinatas, my Sri Guru Vinamaha. The Mom stories of the Shimati and Daniel Somatina. Hare Krishna, Tanya Prabhupada, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Shiva Sai Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve Srimad Bhagavatam this morning. This beautiful, wonderful yatra of ISKCON Phoenix. So when we read Bhagavatam from the first canto, we understand that it was written over 5,000 years ago. However, episodes like this one, it could seem that it was just written for our times. And what is that? Because this is the Lord, and the Lord is eternal, never form. So the teachings and situations apply to every era. Although we are not in Vedic times, we are in Kali Yoga. So whatever we are listening and reading still applies. And again, Kali Yoga, all the negative influences expand even further. So in previous verses, we have read how the great sage Maitreya narrated that the sages led by Brigu Muni, were deeply concerned um, with about the welfare of the people when King Anga's absence, led the kingdom without leadership, and recognizing the need of a ruler, they consulted with Sunita and installed her son Vina as king. So, despite his reputation of cruelty, then Vina's ascension frightened thieves and rogues who hid from him, as stated in Bhagavatam, like rats from snakes. This is a heavy statement. Just imagine the lowest kind of people themselves were afraid of Vina, who was empowered with wealth and strength, resulting in Venus becoming arrogant and being disrespectful to sages and great personalities. He was drunk with pride. He traveled through his kingdom with a destructive force, forbidding sacrifices, charity, religious rituals. So he was rascal number one. And his character serves as example how not to behave and how to be careful, how to warn about becoming like him. And should we ever get empowered with such material benefits, which again are temporary. But alarmed by these irreligious actions and the impending catastrophe, the great sages assembled out of compassion to deliberate on how to address the king's atrocities and protect the people. So now in text 8, when the sages consulted among themselves, they recognize the precarious plight of the people under the reign of King Bina. So they observed that the citizens were like, what does it say? It's like ants caught on the log with blazing from both ends. They symbolizing like the imminent destruction with not safe escape. If they're trapped in the middle, how will you escape? On one side was King Bina, whose arrogance and irreligious policies and oppressive rule pose a direct threat to the welfare of the society, and his actions stopping religious practices, forbidding sacrifices, and disrupting the duties of the brahmanas undermine the spiritual and moral frame of the kingdom. So instead of protecting and nurturing his subjects, Bina's reign became a source of fear and turmoil. We can relate to our times. In many places of the world, I'm not going to mention this country, that country, in many places of the world, if not all, we are seeing the same. On the other side, were thieves and rogues and empowered by the earliest sort of a strong ruler. And although Venus' cruelty initially dropped them into hiding, his lack of righteous governance meant that lawless and disorder still loom over society. The people's vulnerability was amplified by the absence of virtuous leaders or a virtuous leadership. And, the ever-present threat of exploitation by criminals. Yep, this also sounds very familiar. So when a characterless person rules, others like him take note. And the debate begins. Well, who is the best amongst the worst? So people were caught between these two forces. The citizens face a pretty dire situation with no one to protect them or uphold Dharma. The sages, driven by compassion and their duty as protectors of Dharma, deliberated deeply on how to resolve this dual crisis and safeguard the welfare of the people. The sages deeply regretted their decision to appoint Vina as king, recognizing that although it was an attempt to address the political crisis, it had kind of backfired terribly. Because Vina, in spite his position as a ruler, was unqualified to lead with righteousness. We have seen this in Mahabharata, right? We have the examples of Yudhishthira and Duryodhana. One was blinded by pride and ego, etc., and on the other hand was the righteous Yudhishthira. So here, instead of resolving the instability caused by the absence of a monarch, his misrule created greater disturbances. The sages were filled with concern as they pondered on how the people could find happiness or prosperity under such circumstances. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes that certain practices, sacrifice, charity, and penance, are essential for maintaining spiritual progress and social order. According to the Bhagavad Gita 18.5, these practices should not be abandoned by anyone, regardless of their stage in life. Each varna and ashram, the social and spiritual divisions, have specific duties aimed at spiritual elevation. And the brahmacharis perform sacrifices as part of their discipline, as part of their training. The grihastas or householders engage in acts of charity, sustaining the welfare of others. The vanaprasthas and sannyasis, retired renounced orders of life. So they dedicate themselves to austerities and penance. Should dedicate themselves to austerities and penance. So these practices foster spiritual development and purify the mind and contribute to the harmony of the whole society. So when King Vina prohibited these essential religious functions, the sacrifices, the charity, etc., he disrupted the people's ability to fulfill their spiritual duties. So in a way, he was tampering with the free will of others, and that's a no-no. The sages, as protectors of Dharma, were alarmed by this dangerous turn, and they understood that neglecting these practices reduced society to an animalistic state focused solely on material pursuits without higher consciousness. So good governance plays a critical role in facilitating progress in the society. A righteous ruler ensures that citizens can practice their faith freely and securely, while suppressing the thieves and rogues and lawlessness. But without these protections, peace and spiritual advancements becomes impossible, leading to widespread suffering. So imagine dogs hunting hunters. The world is upside down. In many countries, people are suffering. There is no security, there's no safety, there's no protection because the people in power are criminals themselves. So now here the sages, seeing Vina's actions as a direct threat to Dharma and to the people's welfare, feel compelled to take a decisive action. The deliberation reflects the responsibility not only as wise leaders, but also as compassionate guardians of both spiritual and social order. So this story showcases the principles of leadership. It's very important. The governance, the responsibility in society that remain highly relevant in our times. It lies the importance and the lessons that we can learn from here is, is to understand the consequences of poor leadership in every sphere of life. So we need responsible individuals in safeguarding the physical and spiritual welfare. So what is the role of a leadership? A leader maintains dharma, the righteousness. So a leader's primary duty is to hoard dharma by fostering harmonious society. Vina's failure to fulfill this role, shows the dangers of unqualified or oppressive leadership. Communities should be encouraged to integrate spiritual practices such as mindfulness, charity, service, to their daily lives, not bring them closer to, connect them to the God, not to take them away. So the sages' willingness to act reflect their deep sense of responsibility as guardians of Dharma. It's important to note that the sages acted not out of anger, but from a place of compassion and concern from the people. So their approach underscores that effective leadership stems from empathy, a genuine desire to serve others. And let me emphasize this point because it is extremely important. The desire to serve others. We serve Krishna for his pleasure and for the benefit of all. King Vina is an example of what kind of leader we must not follow and we should never come to power. His story reminds us that leadership and governance are sacred responsibilities tied to the spiritual and material well-being of people. So by applying these lessons, we can create societies where Dharma flourishes, leaders act with integrity, and individuals work collectively to ensure a just and prosperous world. It's critical to evaluate a person's character and intentions before placing them in a position of power or trust. Authority and power should always be coupled with accountability and oversight to ensure a proper responsibility. It's time now, I'm over my time, but it's an important story, an important and heavy text actually that we should really understand. And Srila Prabhupada concludes his purport on the text, and the text 10. It says, a serpent who is maintained with milk and bananas simply stores poison in his teeth and awaits the date to bite his master. See, I didn't paraphrase, yeah. So a characterless person may take advantage of situation and waits to show his or her true colors, not character, not etiquette. So I'll close with this from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya Lila, 4 verse 129 to 30. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Sanatana Goswami, my dear Sanatana, although you are the deliverer of the entire universe, and although even the demigods and great saints are purified by touching you, it is the characteristic of a devotee to observe and protect the Vaishnava etiquette. Maintenance of a Vaishnava etiquette is the ornament of a devotee. So the dress of a Vaishnava is the character, and the ornament, the Vaishnava etiquette. So let's make sure we pay attention to the intention that we develop with qualities and good character, and that we wear the most valuable ornament, Vaishnava etiquette. Panchakalpataru